Good evening guys and welcome to the video. My name is Saumil Shah. I work as a software engineer. This video I'm going to be creating a top level FTP module on the top of ftplib. So what are we trying to do? Well, in Python, if you are working with FTP or SFTP, there's a library called ftplib. We are trying to design a library on the top of that which allows various action. For example, inserting pandas data frame, CSV, Excel, JSON file, inserting text file, reading the data and stuff like that. We'll try to use some design pattern called singleton. We'll use interfaces. We'll also use decorator design pattern for error handling. So it's going to be a nice video where you will brush up your concepts on OOPS. So let's get started with this video. Okay. Hope you will enjoy watching this video. All right, let me adjust my screen first of all before we start. Hopefully you can see my screen and let's get started. It's showtime, guys. So all right. So the very first thing you need to do is I need to import libraries. So as I said, I'm essentially developing packages for ftplib, and this will be again published on PyPy and stuff. But this allows the user or the Python developer to insert, read files into FTP and stuff like that. Okay. So the first thing that I want to do is I'm gonna say import ftplib. This is a built-in library. But instead of importing everything, I just want to say from import ftplib. Oops, I think there's a typo. So I would say import ftplib. From ftplib, import the word FTP. So we are essentially importing the class FTP from this. Okay, and hope the font size is visible. I try to make it big because people are also watching from the phones. So let's import OS and let's import sys as well. Okay, once we are done with that, we'll import an IO object, and after that we will try to import pandas. Let's do pandas as PD. Okay, after that we want to import logging because we'll support a nice logging module. So we'll say from function tool import reps. So this is for essentially for decorator design pattern. Okay, and if any of the libraries are missing, well, we want to display a nice Python. We want to display a message. We'll say okay. And if everything works fine, we would love to print the Python version. So we can use the word sys.version. Okay. So my imports are ready. Now I need to do one more thing since I'm going to be using interfaces as well. So I will say from ABC import, we'll say the word capital ABC and abstract method because we want to create interfaces for our code. At this point, I just have started, I essentially am just starting to write I've defined my imports, and at this point, the first thing that I would do is essentially create my settings class, which will hold the settings for the FTP. So I can do that by simply saying we can use the word settings and we can save object. So we'll use a constructor here in this. And the constructor will take following thing: host, user, and port. And then we'll set all these attributes in the constructor. So like that. Okay, looks good, right? Now that's that. Okay. So now once these are defined, right? Now what we need to do is we need to define our main FTP class that's gonna interact, right? So we'll say class FTP, and remember FTP is a built-in word as well, so try not to use that. We have to use something else. So here I'm trying to think about a good name. So this is or we can call FTP. What can be a good name? We can say helper, right? But helper doesn't like FTP module, maybe. Yeah, this or I'm thinking what can be defined as a good name. So, or we can define a lowercase, but usually in Python we don't define classes with lowercase, right? Which is why I'm thinking what could be a good name, right? FTP. So we can say simple FTP. It's a good name, right? I think fair name, right? So or we could use, remember, this is capital FTP. We can use the word small FTP as well. So if you want to do that, we can create a class called small FTP. This works fine. Okay, so we'll use that. Now this class right here will inherit from class called settings. Okay, This will inherit from settings, and then what we need to do over here is in this class we need to create essentially a object of FTP module first. So first of all, I'll define my constructor, and I would call the base class constructor. Okay, so the base class constructor is invoked. That is great. Now we need to create an FTP object, and I can do that by using this self.server FTP module host user and post, right? At this point, this is ready. Now what I can think of is I want to encapsulate this. So I would essentially type double underscore, which will convert that into a private variable. After this point, I think the user can create multiple instances of a class, right? So I want to prevent that using a design pattern called by a design pattern called singleton design pattern. What is singleton? Well, singleton allows you to only create one and only unique instance. Okay. So over here, and also if you see, people can also add attributes at runtime. So I can prevent that by using slots, but for now I would keep things easy and simple. Okay. So I'll define my singleton class right here. So as you can see, we'll name this as a singleton. All this does is essentially it checks the variable class variable called instance, and it checks whether it created an instance or not. If it already created an instance, that means an instance of a class is there, then return that. If not, then it's going to return a none object. So this is a design pattern. Usually you can search it on Stack Overflow or whatever you like. Now what I'm thinking is this design pattern I want to use over this class called FTP. So you can use the word meta class, and then you can say singleton, and then you can use the word comma. Now this class can only have one and only one unique instance. Okay, so as you can see, the code looks beautiful so far, right? But we still need to create modules and stuff. Now what other thing I can think of is usually it's good you can access through a constructor, but if you wanna, so if the user wants to limit access, you can use property decorators here. But as I said, let's keep things easy and not complicated, right? So I have these class. Okay, now what I want to do is I want to do my logging, right? So I'm going to have a class, and I'm going to inherit the FTP from logging class as well. See how I'm trying to build these modules is what you want to see. So we want to say class called logging, and see the way I'm also organizing these classes, right? When you're trying to making packages and modules, there will be hundreds of classes, right? So the way you essentially make it really matters a lot. So, and remember, Python uses snake case, so try to use what you call that a snake case. So here I'm essentially defining a very basic logger, and I have an instance called self.logger. Now the beautiful part about inheritance is essentially you can keep inheriting as much module as you want. So over here I also want to use logger, so I'm going to inherit this from logging module. Now as I've done that, I need to of course invoke the base class constructor, and I can do that by using the class name followed by the word self. Okay, so by this way I have invoked my base class constructor. Now that's great. At this point my base class constructor has been invoked. Now if I want to start logging, I can now easily start using I can say self dot. Remember, since it's inheritance, I have access to all the child members, right? So I have access to the logger object. So I can use the word logger.info, and now I can start, okay, creating. Okay, so beautiful message. So we know that it's trying to connect to the FTP object. Okay, so you see the code is looking beautiful. You see how beautifully we are inheriting stuff here. All right. So we have encapsulated the server object, right? We are using logging, and one more beautiful thing I'm gonna use, but not now, is first of all, let's try defining an interface, right? So an interface essentially means if you want to add more functionality, so today you have FTP, right? Tomorrow if you might have some other type of connection, so all the method names would be same. It acts as an interface, right? We could do that, but as I said, let's right now define our very first method here. This one, so this essentially will get all the files from FTP object. we'll also provide in a path object. We'll set this to default as empty string. So what this will do is the job of this guys is to go over that FTP and return all the files that is present in the server, FTP server. Well, as you can see, I'm using list comprehension here for file in self.server. Now remember, we have to use double underscore private, right? So we could do that, and to be honest, I don't even need that variable. It's sort of redundant. So I could write everything one line and call it for the day. So this one right here would return me all the files from an FTP server. I can say okay, that's great. So you see how beautifully I'm defining my code, right? It starts looking beautiful now, right? You have a method here. Okay, that's great. Now, one more thing and as I said, we can extend this functionality as much as you want, but the other thing that I'm thinking is I want to insert a pandas data frame here, right? So I'm creating a helper function, insert pandas data frame. And remember, FTP lib does not allow you to do all that. You have to write some custom code, which is what I'm doing. I'm building a top level module on that, right? So now people can simply instantiate my class and reuse the code, right? So beautiful, right? So this one would take a couple of things. We'll of course take a pandas data frame. Another thing that this needs to take is a file name, and we also want to take an extension, right? So if any of them is none, if df we'll say if df is none, or file name is none, or if extension is none, we directly want to raise an exception. So we'll say df we want to raise an exception right there, else, right? So else, that means if the user provided something, we want to do something with that, right? So always when you write code, try to always keep thinking about all the edge cases that you can encounter, right? So over here, I'm going to create an IO object, and this one right here, I have written this particular code, for some modules before. So I'm essentially pasting the snippets. As I said, you can go to Stack Overflow. I had went through so many blog posts, but this is what I have. This is what it works. Okay, so trust me. See how I'm trying to build modules is what I want to bring to you. So now I'm saying, okay, if the extension is CSV or JSON or Excel, I'm creating a buffer object and I'm storing that item pandas data frame in a buffer object. So I'm going to do that similarly for Excel and JSON. So my library currently supports 3 modules. And remember, one nice design pattern you could use here is you could use enums here, right? CSV1, Excel does, JSON has 3. You could use enum. Anything that is apart from these 3, you could raise an exception. Hey, extension not supported. So that would be really nice. We could do that, but I think it would be too much for this video. You could essentially come here and say, I think from enum, import enum. And you could define your enum, but let's not do that. It'll be an overkill. I'll add that code, but I'm just trying to show you how I'm trying to write my library, right? Okay, so now that's that. If statements are written, I'm just gonna. So now I'm saying that file wrapper.write. I'm writing essentially, that from the buffer object. So this is gonna give that. Now all I need to do is I need to dump that on an FTP server. So this line here, self.server. Remember, that's an FTP object. Store binary is the word you will use, STOR, then you use essentially the file name. So you can use file name, and essentially this one right here is the buffer object. Okay, so this should take care of your pandas data frame. Okay, and at the end, if everything works right, we definitely want to return a Boolean value, right? So we return that, and what we could do, it would be really nice that I could decorate. I can use a design pattern essentially to have error handling. What I'm trying to say, guys, think about it. Try catch doesn't look good, right? Can't I write a design pattern to do that? Well, this is exactly what I did. Error handling with logging. It's a design pattern. It's a decorated design pattern. It essentially logs every function that you decorate. If something goes wrong in the function, it essentially gonna return a nice, beautiful status -1 error in the error entity. If everything goes right, it returns the message. So I have written this, nice, beautiful. See, the way I'm designing the code is beautiful, right? I'm not writing error handling everywhere. Try catch. No, see how I'm designing it, right? So now I've decorated both of them. So by default, try catch is implemented on both the functions now. As you can see, the code is started to looking beautiful. We are pretty close. It looks like a module, like a proper professional library, right? So the FTP module looks good. We have insert pandas, get all files. It looks good. Now the next item that we need to do is simply get files. Oh no, sorry, insert text data. So if a user passes in the string data, I have a function for that. It takes essentially a text. We can call it text data, and of course I will have to change the name here a little bit. We'll make it double underscore. So there you go. This would insert the text data. I also want to implement error handling here, so I would simply gonna decorate here. Now see how amazing it is, because if you had to write try catch, see, this looks ugly, right? If you are writing code like this, oops, my bad. I'm just showing you, right? Try catch in every function will write try catch. Well, that doesn't look good, right? Instead, try to use a design pattern that solves the problem, such as a decorator design pattern. Well, this is just a suggestion from me. Other than that, I mean, do whatever you like, but this is my suggestion, right? Our module is pretty much ready at this point. If we can collapse that. So this is our main package module, FTP. These are all the helper module settings, singleton, error handling modules that we wrote. So right now we support inserting pandas data frame, text data, getting all the files from an FTP server. We can also provide path. So if you want to get files from a particular directory, we support that as well. As you can see, guys, right, you can easily extend the functionality way beyond this, right? But this is a very good start of writing libraries, right? If you want to write professional libraries in Python, well, this is how you write. One thing you could do is you could also make an interface here, which means you would have a stack. So what I'm trying to say is the interface, that means tomorrow, if any other, today you have FTP, tomorrow you have, let's say, any other, let's say, some other sort of stuff you're doing. So you could have the same method name. Your interface would be same, right? So I think I'll do that for this video as well. So let's define an interface actually. Class. So I'll have an interface and I'm gonna inherit from, I think, ABC. Yeah, ABC. Now I think what we could do is we could have an abstract method here. Okay, and let's define these abstract methods. So the first method is gonna be, okay, so that's gonna be this one. Remember, when you say abstract, you need to provide the implementation, right? And you can write what it does, get all the files from FTP. Okay, so that's that. Remember, you have an interface you need to inherit too, right? So I'm gonna inherit my interface, and see, it's not complaining because Python is smart enough, it knows it's an interface, right? So that's that. Now let me define my other abstract method. Sorry, I keep saying interface. Okay, so now my next method would be insert pandas data frame. So that's that. Insert text data. Okay, so those are all my interfaces. Let's get rid of this. So insert text data. Oh man. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so my interface is ready, and if we collapse our class, so I think we did a pretty decent job. If you see, we have a logging, right? If something goes wrong, everything would be logged. We inherited, we have an interface, we use singleton pattern, and you see the code looks neat, right? Pretty elegant, neat, you know, so it's really generalized as well. I would rather inject a settings class into that. I have a settings class, so what I could do is, well, what I can do instead of this approach, the next approach could be, you could inject instance, right? And you can say self.instance. Okay, now you could remove that. So now remember, here you're using the word instance, and then you can use the host. Wait, was it there? Was it declare in settings? Oh, I think I removed. Oh, it's there. So now I can say self.host, self.instance. instance dot what is his password? Oh, sorry, user. And let's do that. Let's remove this property decorator. It's creating a problem. And similarly, self dot instance dot password, right? So now you're essentially injecting the instance of a class. So if the user wants to use it, well, they have to do something like this, and I'm gonna show you. So now the user will say let's say what is this, FTP, right? So okay, here the user has to pass a settings instance where user can pass host, whatever, like that. What's that username? User and password. So now the user will pass through that way. Oh yeah, I was right, his name. So when we are using injection, what we want to do is over here, you want to write if type self dot instance, because you want to make sure, right, underscore name is equal to, or let's say if it's not equal to, I think was the settings correctly? Yeah, settings. I'm gonna raise an exception right there. Okay, so you could do that. That should add a check where this would make sure that you're only passing essentially the settings instance and not something else. So as you can see, now you're easily encapsulating all the host name and port. You're injecting the instance instead of inheriting, and then you are using host, port, and in the FTP object, you're encapsulating the server, and then we have error handling and all that. So let's keep the video till here. I really hope you have enjoyed it, and I am not gonna edit this video because I really want to upload it raw. All my mistakes and stuff, I want to make sure people watch it. It's a learning, right? So this is, and trust me, I have done this live, right? I haven't recorded and then I'm trying to make it. This is live, right? I hope you have really enjoyed my oops session here of essentially ftplib in Python. I would leave the entire source code in the description. So if you want to read and develop more items into it, you can add more methods here. Feel free to do that, man. I would love to do, I would love if you guys add something in this, right? Make it more generalized, make it a library, right? And publish it in PyPy. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Keep smiling, keep programming, and stay safe. I would see you.